Bride cancels wedding last minute. The reason will shock you. The grand ballroom of the Rosewood Hotel was adorned with white lilies and golden chandeliers, their warm glow casting a soft shimmer across the polished marble floor. Guests whispered excitedly, waiting for the ceremony to begin. The groom, Daniel Carter, stood at the altar, beaming with anticipation, his best man nudging him playfully. But then a murmur rippled through the crowd. Where was the bride? Natalie Pierce had been in her bridal suite just moments ago, adjusting the delicate lace on her dress and taking deep breaths to calm herself. The makeup artist had just finished the final touch, a subtle pink gloss, when the knock came at the door. Her mother, Evelyn, stepped in, clutching a white envelope. "Sweetheart, this was delivered just now. No name on it." Curious, Natalie took the letter and carefully unfolded it. As her eyes moved across the page, her breath hitched. The room spun. Her hands trembled. She bolted upright. "I can't do this." Her bridesmaids stared at her. "What do you mean?" Emily, her maid of honor, asked. Natalie shook her head frantically. "I have to stop the wedding." Without another word, she lifted her dress and rushed out of the room, ignoring the gasps of her bridal party. Her heels clicked urgently against the marble as she made her way down the corridor, the letter still clutched in her hand. At the altar, Daniel's smile faltered when he saw her approaching, her expression tight with panic. The guests murmured in confusion. Natalie stopped just a few feet away from him, chest heaving. "I can't marry you." A hush fell over the room. Daniel laughed nervously. "What are you talking about? Nat, we're about to—" She held up the letter, her voice shaking. "You tell me, is this true?" Daniel's face drained of color. His Adam's apple bobbed as he swallowed hard. Her voice cracked. "Is it true, Daniel?" The best man, Andrew, shifted uncomfortably, looking between the two. The guests leaned forward, straining to hear. Daniel took a slow step forward. "Natalie, whatever that letter says, we can talk about it." Her eyes burned with tears. "Talk about it? You lied to me. You—" Her voice caught in her throat. "You already have a wife." Gasps erupted in the ballroom. Someone dropped their champagne glass. Natalie clenched the letter. "I didn't believe it at first, but then I saw the photos. Your real wife, Daniel, the one you married 3 years ago in Seattle. Does she know you're standing here, about to marry me?" Daniel's mouth opened, but no words came out. The silence that followed was deafening. Finally, Andrew stepped forward and let out a sigh. "Natalie, it's true." Her heart shattered. "You knew?" she whispered. Andrew nodded, looking guilty. "I told him to come clean. I told him this would blow up in his face." Natalie let out a bitter laugh. "And yet, here we are." She turned to the guests, then back to Daniel. "This wedding is over." With that, she yanked off her engagement ring and dropped it on the floor. It clinked once before rolling to a stop near Daniel's feet. Then, with her head held high, she walked out. The crowd erupted in chaos, voices rising in disbelief. But Natalie didn't stop. Outside, the cool evening air hit her like a lifeline. She took a deep breath, then another, and then she smiled. She had almost married a liar. Almost. But she hadn't. And that was something worth celebrating. Natalie stepped out of the hotel, her chest still rising and falling with the weight of her decision. The streets of downtown Chicago were alive with the sounds of car horns and distant chatter, but she barely heard them. She had just walked out of her own wedding. Her phone buzzed furiously in her clutch. Texts, missed calls. From her mother, her bridesmaids, and even Daniel. She ignored them all and kept walking, her wedding dress trailing along the sidewalk. "Natalie?" She turned at the familiar voice. Andrew, the best man. "What do you want?" she asked, crossing her arms. He hesitated, rubbing the back of his neck. I I just wanted to make sure you're okay." She narrowed her eyes. You knew. You knew he was married and you stood by him. Andrew exhaled. I did, and I regret it. But I swear, I thought he was going to tell you before today. I didn't think he'd actually go through with... He shook his head. You deserve to know the truth. She let out a dry laugh. And yet, you let me walk down the aisle clueless. I'm sorry. Silence stretched between them. A gust of wind blew her veil loose, sending it tumbling onto the street. Neither of them moved to pick it up. Then Andrew spoke again. There's something else. Natalie tensed. What now? He hesitated before pulling out his phone. The letter you got, it wasn't from Daniel's wife. Her blood ran cold. What? He showed her his screen, an email thread. Natalie's eyes darted over the subject line. The truth about Daniel Carter. The sender? Anonymous. They sent it to me too, Andrew said. Late last night. Natalie's pulse pounded. Who sent it? Andrew shook his head. I don't know, but whoever it was, they wanted to make sure you found out before it was too late. A chill ran down her spine. Someone had been watching. Someone knew the truth before she did, and they had made sure she found out. Just in time. But why? And who? Natalie stared at Andrew's phone, her mind racing. Someone had been watching her life unravel before she even knew it was happening. She took a shaky breath. Did you reply? Andrew nodded. Yeah, just a simple, who are you? But no response. He tapped his screen. The email was sent from a burner account, no name, no way to track it. Natalie's stomach twisted. Someone had gone through the trouble of exposing Daniel, but they didn't want to be known. Her heart pounded with suspicion. What if it's her? Who? Daniel's wife, she whispered. What if she found out he was cheating and decided to warn me? Andrew considered it. Maybe, but why be anonymous? Wouldn't she want you to know who she is? Natalie shook her head. Or maybe she's scared. Maybe Daniel doesn't know she found out. Andrew's jaw tightened. That's possible. Natalie grabbed her phone and, for the first time that night, opened her messages. Dozens of texts flooded in, but one stood out. A number she didn't recognize. Unknown. Now you know the truth. But he's hiding more. Be careful. Her fingers tightened around the phone. There's more, she murmured. Andrew leaned in. What does it say? She showed him the message. His expression darkened. Natalie, I think you need to get out of here. Her breath hitched. Why? Andrew glanced over his shoulder, scanning the street. Because if Daniel finds out someone's been feeding you information, he's going to try to stop you from digging further. At that moment, her phone buzzed again. Daniel. Natalie, please, just let me explain. Her heart pounded. No way. She wasn't about to let him manipulate her again. She took a step back. I need to know the rest of the truth. Andrew hesitated. What are you thinking? Natalie set her jaw. I need to find his wife. Natalie and Andrew sat in a dimly lit cafe a few blocks from the hotel. Her laptop sat open in front of her, fingers flying over the keyboard as she searched for any trace of Daniel's secret life. It didn't take long. An old wedding announcement. Seattle, 3 years ago. Natalie's heart pounded. Her name is Olivia. Andrew peered over her shoulder. Does she still live in Seattle? Natalie scrolled, searching for any recent updates. Then, she froze. A news article. Local woman reported missing. Last seen 2 months ago. Andrew sucked in a breath. No way. Natalie's stomach twisted as she clicked the article. A photo of a smiling brunette stared back at her. Olivia Monroe Carter, Daniel's first wife. And she had disappeared 2 months ago, right when Daniel started pushing for a wedding with Natalie. Her hands shook. Oh my God. Andrew sat back. Natalie, this is bad. She barely heard him. Her mind was spinning. Had Daniel done something to Olivia? Before she could speak, another text came through. Unknown. You're getting close. Stop looking before it's too late. Her blood ran cold. Someone was watching, and they didn't want her to find out the truth. Natalie's hands shook as she stared at the text. You're getting close. Stop looking before it's too late. Her pulse pounded. Someone was watching. Someone knew she was digging. Andrew leaned closer. Natalie, we need to go to the police. She swallowed hard, her mind spinning. And tell them what? That my ex-fiancé is a liar and his first wife vanished? That I got an anonymous email and now someone's texting me warnings? Andrew clenched his jaw. It's worth reporting. Natalie hesitated. Maybe he was right. But something deep inside her screamed that this wasn't just about Daniel lying. This was bigger. Her phone buzzed again. Daniel, I need to see you. Now, please. Her stomach twisted. No way. She had nothing left to say to him. She exhaled. We need to find Olivia, if she's still alive. Andrew hesitated. And if she's not? Natalie's throat tightened. Then I need to know what happened to her. Before it happens to me. After an hour of searching, Natalie found something. Olivia had filed for divorce 6 months ago, but the case had been closed. No reason listed. Her last known address was a small apartment in Seattle. Natalie made a decision. I'm going there. Andrew's eyes widened. Are you insane? What if Daniel... I need answers. Andrew let out a sharp breath. Then I'm going with you. Natalie met his gaze. He was serious. He barely knew her, yet he was willing to follow her into this nightmare. Okay, she whispered. They booked the first flight out. Olivia's last address was an old brick building on a quiet street. Paint peeled from the walls, and the windows were dark. Natalie's stomach twisted as she knocked. No answer. She tried again. Still nothing. Andrew exhaled. Maybe she moved. Natalie wasn't convinced. She reached for the doorknob, and it turned. Her heart pounded. Slowly, she pushed the door open. Inside, the apartment was eerily still. Dust covered the furniture. Mail piled up by the door. A single lamp flickered. But what caught her breath was the overturned chair in the center of the room. Andrew tensed. Something's wrong. Natalie took a cautious step inside. Papers were scattered across the floor. A half-packed suitcase sat on the couch, clothes spilling out. As if someone had left in a hurry. Or been taken. Natalie's throat went dry. She didn't leave. She was taken. Andrew was already pulling out his phone. We need to... Then, a sound. The closet door creaked. Andrew's eyes snapped to Natalie's. Someone was inside. Slowly, Natalie stepped toward it. Her heart pounded so loud she could barely hear anything else. She reached for the handle and yanked it open. A woman stumbled out. Thin, pale, eyes wide with terror. Natalie gasped. Olivia? The woman blinked, swaying on her feet. Who? Her voice cracked. Who are you? Natalie caught her before she collapsed. It's okay. She swallowed. Daniel was going to marry me. Olivia's entire body froze. Her eyes filled with horror. She grabbed Natalie's wrist, her grip surprisingly strong. You have to run. Natalie's breath hitched. What? Olivia's voice was desperate. He's coming. Andrew's phone buzzed. He looked down and went pale. He turned the screen to Natalie. A new text? Unknown. You should have stopped looking. A shadow moved outside the window. A car door slammed. A knock at the front door. Natalie's blood ran ice cold. Olivia's grip tightened. It's him. Daniel had found them. The knock at the door sent a shiver down Natalie's spine. Daniel was here. Olivia's nails dug into Natalie's wrist. We have to go, now. Andrew backed toward the kitchen, glancing at the back door. There's another way out. But before they could move, the knock came again, louder this time. Then Daniel's voice. Natalie, open the door. Her heart pounded. How had he found them? She pulled Olivia toward the kitchen, but the woman froze, shaking her head wildly. No, he won't let us leave. Andrew cursed under his breath. He won't have a choice. He grabbed a knife from the counter. Another knock, this time followed by the doorknob turning. He had a key. Natalie's stomach dropped. They had seconds. She made a split-second decision. The closet, now. Olivia hesitated but obeyed, slipping inside the tiny coat closet. Natalie followed, pressing her back against the wall. Andrew ducked behind the kitchen island, gripping the knife. The front door creaked open. Footsteps? Slow, deliberate. Then, his voice. Natalie, I know you're here. She held her breath. The footsteps moved deeper into the apartment. I get it, Daniel continued, his tone eerily calm. You're scared, confused, but we don't have to do this. Natalie clenched her jaw. Do what? Daniel sighed. A shuffle of papers. He was picking up the mess on the floor. Olivia always did this too, he muttered. Panicked, overreacted. A bitter chuckle. And look how that turned out. Natalie's pulse spiked. Andrew shot her a look from across the room. He had heard it too. Daniel knew what had happened to Olivia. And now, they knew too. The floor creaked as Daniel moved toward the kitchen. Natalie's breath hitched. He was getting closer. Andrew tightened his grip on the knife. Then, his phone buzzed. Loud. Sharp. The room went silent. Then, Daniel's voice, cold as ice. Well, that's inconvenient. And then, he lunged. Andrew barely had time to react. He swung the knife up, catching Daniel's arm as he reached for him. Daniel hissed in pain but didn't stop. He tackled Andrew, slamming him into the counter. The knife clattered to the floor. Natalie burst out of the closet. Daniel's head snapped toward her, eyes wild. Natalie. She grabbed the nearest thing, a glass vase, and smashed it against his head. He staggered back, cursing. Blood dripped down his temple. Andrew seized the moment. He grabbed the knife and drove it into Daniel's shoulder. Daniel roared in pain. But still, he didn't go down. Natalie grabbed Olivia and ran. Andrew followed, slamming the back door shut behind them. They bolted down the alley, their breath ragged. Natalie didn't dare look back. Then, a gunshot. The bullet shattered a streetlight ahead of them. Natalie screamed. Andrew grabbed her arm, yanking her behind a dumpster. Olivia collapsed beside them, sobbing. Daniel's voice echoed through the alley. You should have just married me, Natalie. Her blood turned to ice. This wasn't about love. It never was. It was about control. And Daniel would rather kill her than let her walk away. Police sirens wailed in the distance. Daniel cursed. Then, silence. Natalie's heart pounded as she peeked around the dumpster. Daniel was gone. Andrew exhaled sharply. We need to get out of here. But Natalie wasn't relieved, because she knew Daniel, and he wasn't done. This wasn't over. Not yet.